Hello everyone, I'm Heather from iTalk You Talk Press. Today I'd like to read you a short story from this book. This book is Old Jack's Ghost Stories from Japan. Now this book won the finalist award in the Language Learner Literature Awards. I'm going to read you the introduction and the first story. I hope you like it. Message from Old Jack. Hello and welcome to my book of Japanese ghost stories. A few years ago, I visited Ireland to do some research for my book, Old Jack's Ghost Stories from Ireland. One evening, I was sitting in the hotel bar when I met Mr. Yamada, a Japanese tourist. He was sitting at the table next to mine. We started talking. Mr. Yamada had travelled to Ireland for an interesting reason. He wanted to visit the childhood home of the writer Lafcadio Hearn. Lafcadio Hearn was born in 1850 and died in 1904. He travelled to Japan and lived in Matsue, Mr. Yamada's hometown, for about a year. There he married the daughter of a samurai. They had 4 children, and Lafcadio spent the rest of his life in Japan. I was interested to hear Mr. Yamada's story about Lafcadio Hearn, but I was even more interested when he told me that Lafcadio Hearn researched and collected Japanese ghost stories. Mr. Yamada and I talked for a long time. He told me about his hometown. He said, Lafcadio Hearn's house is still there. Now it is a popular tourist spot. You should visit Matsue. You can stay with me. I will tell you Hearn's ghost stories and take you sightseeing. Mr. Yamada and I exchanged addresses, and we wrote to each other regularly. Then, last year, in the autumn, when the leaves were turning red and orange, I decided to visit Mr. Yamada and learn about Japanese ghosts. So come and join me on my great adventure in the wonderful country of Japan and enjoy the mysterious world of Lafcadio Hearn's Japanese ghost stories. Story number 1 is called A Mother's Love. I arrived in Matsue in the early afternoon. Mr. Yamada and his wife were waiting for me. We shook hands. It's good to see you again, old Jack-san. Welcome to my hometown, said Mr. Yamada. It's wonderful to see you too, I said. It's nice to meet you, said Mrs. Yamada. It's nice to meet you too, Mrs. Yamada, I said. What should I call you? She asked. Call me Old Jack, I said. Everybody calls me Old Jack. They took me to their home, a beautiful traditional Japanese house near Matsue Castle. We went into the house and they took me to my room. Mr. Yamada opened the sliding paper doors and said, Is this room okay for you, old Jack-san? Oh yes, it's wonderful, I said. It had beautiful tatami mats and sliding paper blinds called shoji on the windows. It had a view of the Yamada's traditional garden. It was very different from my house in England. It was charming and very peaceful. Maybe Lafcadio Hearn felt like this when he first came here, I thought. I was tired after my long trip, so I had a rest for a few hours. Then Mr. Yamada said to me, "Let's go for a walk. I'll take you to a place with an interesting story." We walked through the quiet, narrow streets to a place called Nakabaramachi. Lafcadio Hearn told an interesting story about this area, said Mr. Yamada. A ghost story? I asked. Mr. Yamada smiled. Yes. A long time ago, there was a small sweet shop here. The shop sold a kind of sweet syrup called mizuame. Mothers gave it to children when there was little milk. One night, just before the shop closed, a woman entered the shop. The shop owner looked at her. She was very thin and pale, and she looked very tired. The shop owner thought, "I've never seen her before. She looks sick and tired. Is she okay?" The woman bought a small amount of mizuame and left the shop. Did she say anything to the shop owner? I asked. No, she didn't. She came back the next night and the night after that. After a few nights, the shop owner started to worry because the woman looked so sick. So he decided to follow her. We stopped walking and stood outside a temple called Daioji. It was my first time to see a Japanese temple, so I took some photographs. So, did he follow the woman? I asked. Yes, he did. Where did she go? I asked. She came here, said Mr. Yamada. The shop owner followed her to the temple gate and stopped. He was very frightened, so he did not enter the temple. Why? The woman lived at the temple. That's not frightening, is it? I asked. Mr. Yamada smiled. Well, yes, but no. Follow me. We walked through the temple gate and into a graveyard. You see, this is a graveyard. I looked around. It seemed peaceful in the late afternoon sun. The next night, the shop owner decided to follow the woman again, but this time he asked his friends to go with him. They followed her into this graveyard. When she arrived at a tomb, she disappeared. Disappeared? Where did she go? I asked. Well, the shop owner and his friends heard a strange noise from one of the tombs. It sounded like a baby crying. They were very frightened, but they lifted up the tombstone and they saw the body of the woman. She was dead, but next to her there was a child. The child was alive, and next to the child there was a cup of mizuame. "Oh," I said. I was shocked. The ghost of the dead mother bought the mizuame every night to feed her child. We stood quietly looking at the graves. Then Mr. Yamada smiled. "Of course, old Jack-san, we don't know if this story is true or not, but I like to think it is true." I agreed with Mr. Yamada. I hoped it was a true story. Thanks to the love of the dead mother for her child, the young child was found and saved. How was it? Did you enjoy the story? I hope so. See you in the next video.